right, good morning, everyone. My name is Katia Mesa. I'm the CHCI BP Public Policy Fellow, and I'm delighted to be with you today for the Latinos in Space session. I know I'm not the only one who dreamt of being an astronaut one day when I was a kid, until I realized how quickly I get motion sick. But, well, maybe the astronaut life isn't for me. I did go on to get a degree in biocomputer engineering. So as a young Latina in STEM, I'm excited to hear about this growing industry and how we as Latinos can find a place in it. On behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank Raytheon for their generous support of this session. This is an exciting time to discuss space exploration as NASA plans to launch Artemis 1 this month. This week, actually.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tonight.
Hopefully tonight.
1 o'clock,
Yeah.
1 a.m.
Oh. This session will discuss the cultural, commercial, and geopolitical impacts of our modern-day space race and how we can ensure Latinos are not only represented, but also play a key role in the aerospace industry. It is now my honor to introduce the session chair, Congressman Darren Soto, who was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2016 to represent Florida's 9th Congressional District. Now in his third term, he currently serves on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce and the House Committee on Natural Resources. The first Floridian of Puerto Rican descent to serve in Congress, Congressman Soto represents communities that make up Central Florida's world-renowned theme parks, citrus and cattle farms, and is home to the Kennedy Space Center, the United States Space Launch Center in Florida. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Congressman Darren Soto.
First of all, thank you, Katia. You make us proud, and we're so happy to have you working at our office at a very exciting time in the Congress and in the country. And we've been honored to host CHCI interns for many years now, and I've hired a few of them too, so stay close. You know, I love the theme here, Latinos in space, right? Those of you who laughed hardest are as old as me or older, because that's like Lost in Space. That was like the big theme. And then there was Pigs in Space, SNL. Anybody remember that?
Yep.
Gosh, old school. Well, I represent an area of Central Florida that is both about even between Hispanics and African Americans and Anglos, with a slight plurality of us. And when we look up, we see rockets launch every week, right? From our backyards in Kissimmee to the elementary school that my wife is an assistant principal at. And it continues to inspire. But it goes beyond that. We see a lot of folks who live in Central Florida take the beach line out to the coast and work as rocket scientists and in all sorts of different missions out at the Cape. And it's been an exciting time. Cape Canaveral continues to be the busiest spaceport in the world. Over 70% of the launches in the world are happening there. And we see over many years, and it's in fact surprisingly so when you go there, because you expect that there's not going to be a lot of us, and there are many of us there. Whether it's the pipeline from University of Puerto Rico and UCF to NASA, or whether it is the emerging and growing number of astronauts who are of Hispanic descent, we are seeing a rise in the Latino influence in both Cape Canaveral and across the nation. Folks like Dr. Frank Rubio, who's on the ISS right now and is a flight engineer from Florida, right? So we're really proud of him. And then another one, Jose Hernandez, who came back and is now slated to go up in a few years again, where they're making a movie about him. He was rejected 11 times. So hopefully that is a lesson in tenacity for all of you, because on the 12th time, well, they brought him in, and he's specializes in computers. So there's a lot to learn from Mr. Hernandez as well. And when we look at tonight, I'll be flying back later on this afternoon and heading to see personally, hopefully, Artemis go off tonight. This is our third attempt to go, and hopefully we'll see that go forward. But that's a huge step towards getting back to the moon, to Mars and beyond. Of course, that mission will be uncrewed. It'll go around the moon and orbit beyond the moon, so it'll go as far as any potentially crewed spacecraft can ever go, or has ever gone. And of course, we want to make sure from there, when we do return to the moon, it'll be in a permanent presence. And we are confident that some of those first crews to go to Mars will have a member of the Hispanic community there. And then I think about all the spin-off technologies that happen because of NASA, everything from the ballpoint pen to Teflon to so many different things that were developed during the space program. And we know this is important. So one of the things I'm proud about in our district is that we're starting to see more STEM-aligned schools like Neo City. And it's a diverse group of young people going there. It warms my heart to see more and more, particularly since women in STEM is a really important issue for the Soto family, with my wife being an assistant principal, seeing many more Latinas. Let's give it up for the Latinas, guys, come on.
Yeah.
Seeing more Latinas going into STEM in my district really warms my heart. We've worked on a bunch of different issues related to space technology. The biggest one is the Launches Act, which we're working with the FCC on right now. You'll see there's a lot of bureaucracy. Every time you launch a shuttle or a rocket, you have to get an individual FCC license. That ends up being a real hassle when we're trying to support innovation. So we've gotten the FCC a little bit of the ways there by improving their regulations, but we have a ways to go. The other thing we've worked on a lot is deep space projects, like supporting, making sure that we're looking at some of the moons of Jupiter and of Saturn with $1 billion in federal research funding. That's something that we help lead the charge on, knowing that those areas, there may be water in some of those moons over there, and that could be a big issue. Then, of course, the supply chain. So one of the biggest things we passed in this session was the CHIPS Act, which is the Chips and Science Act. It's very important to mention that second part. We know chips are huge for lowering costs. They're also huge for space. In our district, in Neo City, we actually make aerospace and space chips. We're shrinking major components and circuit boards that were this big down to nearly microscopic so that we could have ever shrinking and smaller satellites. And that's an area as well that many of us from the Hispanic community are working in and leading the charge in that research. But it's also the investment we're making in science from the CHIPS and Science Act. For many years, we invested over 2% of our GDP in scientific research, well up through the 60s and 70s. And then we saw a huge decline over the last 30, 40 years, while China, our economic rival, not our enemy, but our economic rival, has steadily increased their scientific research. So this puts us from about 0.7% to about 1.3, 1.4%. We want to still get back to 2%. But when we're investing in scientific research, basic research, it's something where we really, like with climate change, need to look to far into the future of our nation and be able to willing to invest now, knowing that we're not going to see most of those results in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but 20, 30, 40 years down the line. And it gives me hope when I think of things like the cancer moonshot and all the new technologies and cures we've seen in the healthcare space, even the advancement of a vaccine for COVID within record time. And if any of us would have thought in 2020 that we were going to see a vaccine before the end of the year that actually was approved and rolled out, it would have been a surprise. And serving on the Energy and Commerce Committee, we have jurisdiction over that as well. But it happened. And part of it was the basic research that was done over many years, looking at RNA vaccine technologies. And the last thing I'll mention is we had a female scientist who never got more than her master's degree from University of Pennsylvania. I'm going to say her name is Kalichnikov. I'm going to have to double check on that. But Dr. Fauci said this woman was really kind of obsessed. We thought she was kind of crazy because she kept on thinking that RNA would be used for a vaccine when most vaccines come from bacteria and fungi and other natural areas. And by the time we got to the 2000s, it really became obvious that her obsession was genius. And she finally is getting credit for that work, but it shows we got to look to what we're doing right now in launching Artemis tonight. We got to look to both midterm, what we can do to help out in boosting science and keep us on track, but this long-term research is going to be critical. And the only thing I ask of all of you is if you're interested in STEM, I know we have a lot of folks who will be future members of Congress and industry titans, reporters, and staff and researchers, that you take an interest in STEM policy, in space policy. If you're here, I'm going to make an assumption that you're on that path potentially. So I encourage all of you, because we have some trailblazers who are Hispanics who are making it into space, but it's going to take many more of us getting interested to really keep that sustainable. So let's keep working on it. Thank you, CHCI, for all the work that you're doing, and let's make sure we have more Latinos and Latinas in space. Thank you, everybody, for having me.
All right, thank you, Congressman Soto, for your insightful words on our nation's aerospace industry and for your kind words. Great boss, even more like amazing office. So the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or as most of us know it, NASA, is America's civil space program and the global leader in space exploration. With a workforce of just under 18,000 civil servants, NASA works with many U.S. contractors, academia, and international and commercial partners to explore, discover, and expand knowledge for the benefit of humanity. NASA sends its greeting from a member of the Artemis team, Erica Alvarez, Systems Engineering and Integration Manager, Advanced Exploration Systems at NASA. As an integral part of the Artemis team, she leads cross-program integration, mission design and development, and systems engineering functions across Artemis to prepare for the first human landing on the moon in over 50 years.
Hello, I am Erica Alvarez, and I work here at NASA, and I do all the systems integration across our Artemis campaign. That means taking 6 different vehicles and our spacesuits with multiple commercial partners and international partners and integrating them into one mission. I started my work at NASA working on Space Shuttle, and I also led a lot of the design, the trades, and the lead systems engineering for the Space Launch System, which is now getting ready for its maiden voyage down at Kennedy Space Center. Here at NASA, we are incorporating a diverse set of Latino Americans all across the US and the globe in order to solve all the technological challenges that we have to return to the moon and eventually to Mars. A lot of that work incorporates trying to bring in new power systems, trying to understand the terrain, the navigation, my team does all the mission planning as well that we'll be doing on the lunar missions, how we get to transit and rendezvous all the systems, and even the unique science that we'll be doing on our lunar orbiting platform known as the Gateway. A lot of this work is made possible because I have many friends here from the Latinx community at NASA that are working everything from being a chief engineer of the human landing system to building all the packages that deploy the payloads that are going to be on Artemis 1, and even having friends doing all the technical insight of what it takes to actually certify these vehicles. Going to the moon and eventually to Mars takes everything from even being able to have new food systems that are safe, designing all the exercises, and having medical equipment that's available for these missions. I really hope that you guys are having a great meeting there in Washington, D.C. I wish I could have been there in person, but I want you to know that we have many here from the Hispanic community that are working on ensuring that we are able to have the first woman land on the moon and also the first person of color. Thank you.
We appreciate NASA's support for this session and hearing about the complex roles Latinos are playing in the launch of Artemis 1. And we all look forward to learning more about who will be the first woman to land on the moon. Now, let's begin our conversation. To facilitate this panel, we are delighted to have Joanne Padron Carney as our moderator for this session. Ms. Padron Carney is Chief Government Relations Officer for the American Association for the Advancement of Science, where she provides oversight of federal relations, local science and engagement network, and the R&D budget and policy program. Prior to joining the Association for the Advancement of Science, she led the Government Relations Office for the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, where she followed civil space, civil aeronautics, and defense issues for almost 10 years. Please welcome our moderator, Joanne Padron Carney.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I'd like to, although the Congressman's not here, I'd like to also extend my thanks for his wonderful introduction and remarks to setting the stage for this important conversation. And I'm also extending my warm wishes and for a successful Artemis I mission. So I was so honored when I was invited to moderate this session, not only because of my time working at AIAA, but really for a more personal reason. My father came to this country in the late 40s from Cuba to study aeronautical engineering, not something very common for someone like him. And he stayed, became a US citizen, and eventually became one of the many, many engineers that contributed to the success of the Apollo program. So he was an early generation Latino in space. But fast forward and look at who we have here with us today, and all of you here in the audience. NASA is having a moment. There have been amazing successes. The Mars Perseverance Program, the James Webb Space Telescope Program. Those are amazing advancements, and Latinos and Latinas have been a part of this. They've contributed to this program. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation with our panelists today and with you all. I hope we can dive deeper into some of the issues about the important role that Latinos play in space. But there is a lot more we can do, and I hope we will explore that, because there are not enough of us. There need to be more. And one statistic I saw, there was maybe NASA had about 7% of employees that counted themselves as Hispanic or Latino. So there is more that we can do. So I am delighted to be joined by these four experts. We will have a conversation, and at the end of our discussion, we'll turn to the audience and continue that conversation. I will introduce each of them briefly, and then we will dive right in. So but I will also want to remind you that while we're having this conversation, don't forget that you can follow it and contribute to social media. Use the hashtag CHCI Summit. Okay? So, first is Matt Magana. I'm going to introduce each of you. You could just a brief introduction of your organization. Okay? So, Matt Magana is Vice President for Raytheon Intelligence and Space. Matt.
Hi, everybody. Thank you guys for inviting me. For those of you guys that don't know, everybody usually hears Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. Hopefully, many of you guys know Raytheon. Raytheon has been in the space business since the beginning. In the early 60s, when the first satellites were launched, Raytheon was part of that. Raytheon was also part of the Apollo mission, the radio that communicated the first orders that came down from when we stepped on the moon. That was Raytheon. And our innovation continues to grow every single day. We are, like today for the launch, we run RG Next, which controls all of the ranges across the United States for all of these launches. We do things on the International Space Stations, from wheels to air systems, all the way to, and then we do sensors, our whole sensor business, missile warning, missile defense, DoD, intelligence community. We do all of the ground systems for NASA. We do CGS, which just launched JPSS last week, and we're command and controlling that. We also do ground system for the intelligence community and the DoD. So we've been in space since the beginning, and lots of innovation and lots of money into diversity. We've actually, or a little bit higher than that, let's say we're closer to 14% Hispanics, and there's 174,000 people at Raytheon, so the number's higher. It's a smaller percentage, but definitely higher.
Thank you, Matt. Welcome. Okay, next we have Karina Perez Molina. She's the Director of Uncrewed and Emerging Aviation Technologies with the Aerospace Industries Association.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. So with the Aerospace Industry Association, we're a trade association representing about 300 companies throughout the supply chain, so anyone who builds the small little rivets all the way to your Raytheons and Northrops who build the larger systems. We are a consensus-based organization, so we bring together our companies to identify what they care about and then go to the various parts of government to discuss how we can best integrate the technology, what the government needs. So we're kind of the middle person between industry and government. And right now, diversity and inclusion is a big thing for our industry as a whole, because while there's all these different numbers, which you're doing a lot better than the industry as a whole, it's, I believe, 9% of 2.1 million jobs considers themselves Hispanic or Latino, and only 4.8% are in leadership positions. So it's a very small number. It's growing. We have a lot of work to do. So we're getting there, and so you're doing a really good job in that end. And on my second hat, I co-founded a fellowship that provides internships and mentorship for students from underrepresented backgrounds. So we place them with different companies, and we give them an executive mentor and a near-peer mentor. And they also have to do a community engagement project so that they can connect their communities to our industry, kind of hoping to bridge a little bit of that gap, but we can only do a small part of it all.
Thank you, Karina. Okay, and next we have Laura Delgado Lopez, who is a senior. Oh, I'm sorry, Ana. I'm jumping. I'm like reading in the wrong order. Dr. Ana Mosquera, who is an astrophysicist and a research scientist at George Mason University.
Thank you for the introduction. It's a true pleasure to be here. It's my first time participating of such an event, and it is wonderful. And so I'm an astrophysicist. I work at George Mason University. It's a world-class university that has diverse departments and centers that are involved in space research. And through George Mason, I'm a contractor at the United States Naval Observatory, which is a leading institution in precision positioning, navigation, and time operations, perhaps very well known because it provides precise time for GPS, and it's involved in other space projects. And by the way, I should say that here are my own opinions and do not represent the position or visions of any institutions I have been affiliated with or I am affiliated with. And I'm very passionate about space, and during my career, one of the most exhilarating experiences that I had was to be an analog astronaut for Hera, and I was at Johnson Space Center simulating a trip to Phobos, the largest moon of Mars. And I will do everything that is in my power to one day go to space.
Thank you, Ana. And then now we have Laura Delgado Alvarez, a senior policy analyst at NASA.
Hi, everyone. I think you've heard of NASA a little bit. So I won't necessarily introduce the agency, but I will tell you a little bit about what I do, because I think, we've touched on some great achievements, all the big programs. That's really exciting work. But then there's people like me who are not scientists or engineers and who have a really, really interesting career in space. I'm a policy person. I study political science. I do work that crosses the interplay between international relations, governance, and policymaking, advocacy, working with other stakeholders. So really exciting, and it's a good example and a reminder that there's all these other careers that support and are part of our space activities and our space sector. And so if you sometimes, you're excited about all this, you don't see yourself because maybe you didn't ace calculus. I didn't either. That's fine, but you're a really good writer, you enjoy public speaking, and you have other skills. We definitely need you, so that's really important too. So one last note on that, I'm representing today the Office of Technology Policy and Strategy. This is a new office at NASA headquarters that was created last November, so we just turned a year. And we provide analysis to the NASA senior leadership as they think through, the big challenges that are facing the agency and how we set ourselves on a path for success after Artemis 1 successfully launches in a few hours.
Thank you very much. So let's just dive right in. So one of the things that struck me when I was looking into your bios, and I really encourage you all to look at they just have amazing backgrounds, is that you each represent a really important sector that makes up what, the aerospace community. We have, in industry. We have, let me go. So you have NASA, which is, of course, so very important. You have industry, you have academia, and then you have organizations like AIA that support the community as a whole. So could you maybe talk a little bit more about how you all, your own career paths, what led you to this particular part of the aerospace community, and maybe challenges or the things that kind of really inspired you? Matt, why don't you go first?
Okay, to start, I'll say, space is cool. Everybody loves space. How awesome is it to be in the space industry? It sells itself most of the time. What I quickly found, I was telling before the panel, is that rewind 20 years ago when I started in the company, there was pretty much, if you went to any space type government thing, it was primarily whites, period. And there was not diversity that's there. I'm very proud to be on this panel here with four great, Latino people that are in space. And that's something that is just, rewind 20 years ago that we didn't really think that was there. And I've had a great mentor at the time. He was an African-American guy. He actually was our CIO for the company. And he and I spent a lot of time sitting down just talking about how hard space is and how most people get intimidated by space because it is very hard. You're going up against very, very intelligent people. But the reality is that you are all just intelligent as they are. So, he always reminded me that just persistence, you're smart, go use that, bring yourself to the table, you deserve a spot at the table, and don't be intimidated by, the quantities, the numbers, or the intelligence, because we're just as smart as those guys are and gals, and, we can definitely deserve a spot at the table. And I just really have continued to push that. Say my wife is actually works at Northrop Grumman, my arch nemesis. She too is Latina, Patricia Magaña. She works at Northrop. She is in the space business now also. So, it's great to see the movement and the shift. It's important for us to keep pushing.
Thank you.
I was going to say interesting dinner table
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
We didn't know that until after we met.
So I started in this industry about 5 years ago. So I'm newish to the industry, but I was lucky enough to have good mentors that helped me in opening the doors and letting me do the work. He was really good at opening the doors and giving me the opportunities, and I just took them and did everything I could at the best level that I could to advance, and I was very lucky to do that. But it all started for me when I saw Lori Garver, who many of you know, speak at a political convention, because I'm a political science graduate, and I saw her speak, and I saw her be deputy administrator of NASA, and I said, how do I end up with where you are? I know, high ambitions, but how do I end up where you are? And I did ask her, and she told me, get the word space in your resume. And she was right. It's an amazing community. Once you're in, you're in. Once you're in, the community will bring you in. It's something that it has very much in common with the Latino community. It's very much like once you're a part of the family, you're in the family, you're going to stay in the family. So I interned for the House Science Committee. So if a lot of you are interning on the Hill, it is a good starting point to come in. Went back to LA to finish my education, worked with the LA Mayor's Office on STEM initiatives, and then I came back with AIA as an intern without a plan, without any idea of what I was going to do. I just packed 2 bags and said, my mom, I might be back. I don't know. If I find a job, I'll stay. Luckily, AIA hired me, and they've moved me through the ranks pretty fast, but it was because I just took all the opportunities I could. So say yes a lot. Say yes a lot to what people are going to offer you, and ask questions, because those questions will lead to slightly open doors, and you just stick yourself in there and say, yeah, I'm a part of this. Yeah. Yeah. But that's how I ended up here, and now I just try to bring others along with myself, try to open as many doors that I can for others, because there's not enough of us here, and I don't want to be alone in a room full of white men, which is still a thing, but it's still a thing. But I don't want to be alone there, and I want to bring as many as I can with me.
Well, I love space since I was a kid, and I thought, like, well, I was born in Uruguay, and I thought, well, you know, it's a small country, we do not have a space program, what can I do? And I was passionate about astronomy, so I decided to pursue a career in astronomy. And then one thing that I was telling them, you know, panels and these kind of things, it's not my thing. I like to be at the office, and I'm shy. And but one of the key things was exposure and telling people about my dreams and telling people what I want to do. And I was very lucky. I was an international school for young astronomers when I was an undergrad, and I told a professor what I like to do in astronomy. And it turned out that she said me, do you know about this fellowship? It was the fellowship that I ended up doing in grad school in Spain. And in Spain, I have many obsessions. I got obsessed about working with someone in the astrophysics community and things, you know, I expressed that, and he supported an application for my fellowship, which I also got. And then I was very lucky to be a visiting professor at the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. They are super powerful in aerospace. And right outside my office, I had all the pictures of the astronauts that they have produced. Including Michael Lopez Alegria, which is American. He was born in Madrid. And they have events, and through those events, I got to know Michael and other astronauts. And this was like in 2014. And if you asked me, like, you know, 20 years ago, would you ever dream about going to space or about having the experience that I had at Johnson, I would have said, no, I mean, that's impossible. But, you know, things have changed. And, you know, they all of them encouraged me to try it, to give it a try. And that's how I ended up applying for this opportunity at NASA Johnson, which was amazing because we were guinea pigs from the psychological perspective, that the guinea pigs got to play with many of the things that real astronauts play, like including the robotic arm that they use on the International Space Station and other replicas of those space systems. And, you know, I think that right now, like the whole space community is evolving so much that anyone, any background, has an opportunity to be part of this community. And actually, at some point, I was like trying to push myself, which is the right role, so one day I can go to space. And talking to one of my heroes, one of the astronauts, he said, you know, be the best that you can be at what you do. Be passionate about that. Because right now, it's not like, you know, many years ago in which perhaps some specific backgrounds were more likely to go to space, perhaps like, you know, pilots, the military. It's changing now. And, you know, for example, and ESA, for example, has in the last call, made an opening for even specifically for backgrounds in computing, and specifically for backgrounds that, you know, back in the time, I wouldn't say that wouldn't be the traditional ones. But summing up and rambling, I think that is you know, get a little bit of exposure, tell people about your dreams, because you're going to know about opportunities that perhaps you wouldn't otherwise. And through my whole career, there's always people that have helped me, and the community is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna.
And I can pick up on that theme. I think my career has been motivated by this idea of figuring out what I'm good at and getting to do what I am good at. And I didn't grow up liking space or anything like that. I had to catch up. I discovered it as an adult. I did an internship on the Hill, and one of my first jobs was to sort the mail. And at the time, there's a publication called Space News. It's a trade publication, and they used to publish their newspaper once a week. And no one wanted it, and I started hoarding it, because I'm like, can you believe that someone gets to? So I would read it, and I'm starting kind of this idea dawning on me that, hey, maybe I could have a career in this. It seems made up. That's what my parents told me. But over time, met some great people who took me to NASA Goddard to get a tour. You know, you start realizing that maybe it's not made up. Go to hearings, go to briefings, and eventually came back to finish my undergrad in Puerto Rico and started coming back to DC for other internships, and went to grad school at George Washington, just a few blocks from here, the Space Policy Institute. But that felt like a big risk. because my parents come from very traditional academic careers. Again, no one I know does anything related to this. I also come from social science humanities, so no one's a scientist or an engineer that could say, yes, those are real acronyms. So that was a big risk, but I was really driven by this idea that, I find space really interesting, less because of the mission. The mission is super important, and if you're passionate about the mission, that's great, but you don't have to be. I am passionate about the fact that it's all these different people working together trying to figure out how to do something complicated. And I love that. And I love that I get to work with people from South Africa and Russia and Argentina and Chile, and I love that. And I love that one of the challenges I get to work on is helping translate really cool, complicated, hardly makes sense, science about, say, the sun, and how the sun's impact on our atmosphere can impact our electrical grid because of space weather. And the fact that I get to explain that's what it gives me passion. And so I think coming to grips with this idea of defining what you're good at, what you like doing it, even if it's non-traditional, and then building that network, because it is a really good community, and the relationships that you'll build today, you'll still meet up with them 5 years later on a panel. And it's just one of the strengths of it. So I'll stop with that, but I think my career path has been stumbling on and finding, I think, that stability in just what I'm good at and what drives me.
So I'm going to go back to you, because what you close with is almost kind of like advice. We have a very young audience here, so maybe go to each of you, kind of like, if, either it's advice that someone gave you that you think you would want to repeat, or what advice would you give this audience in terms of pursuing career path in aerospace? So,
yeah, I'll give two quick ones. One I wish I had gotten. When I was growing up as a student and going, applying to grad school and applying to jobs, I thought that the institutions that I was affiliated with mattered a lot. And I came from the University of Puerto Rico, not an Ivy League or anything like that. And I did really well, but I was not really competitive with some of my peers. But I had a resume that told a different story about all the extracurricular work and the relationships and that, that passion to do something different, right? So, sometimes you feel like you're starting 2 steps behind just because for life reasons you went to X school or you went to that internship, not that other one. That's fine. You get to make of it what you want, I think. So that's something I wish I had gotten rid of, that anxiety. A related one is if you're thinking about school and what minor or major, or also doesn't matter that much. It matters because it should drive you to excel and complete your degrees. That's what matters. But it's less because whatever those words are, that's what's going to get you that job. Again, you're going to do that work to sell yourself. Mm-hmm. So maybe be a little less anxious about that. And the other one I'll mention is we've talked about those relationships being really important. One I want to highlight is informal mentors. So whether it's peers or people that you somehow find you have a connection with that you met at a reception or something like that, stay in touch with them, reach out. 9 times out of 10, they want to help. They want to help you think through, is that training something you should consider? What about this company Raytheon that no one has heard of? But then they'll be like, actually, Raytheon is a leader in our sector, right? And so it's a way to fill your gaps, help you navigate the community, even if these people haven't signed a form. And I am a formal mentor on Z-Factor and other programs. Very, very passionate about that too. So do take advantage of formal mentorship relationships. But the informal ones will have a big role as well.
I don't know.
Well, I think that Laura said all the advice I also would share with you. Just focus on what you are passionate about it. The space sector now is open to everyone. I think we're bringing society of Earth is happening. So wherever you're passionate about it, just try to find in which way you fit in. Be bold. That's what I would say. be bold because many of the things that I have done, those applications that I have submitted, that application that I said to Johnson, it was like, I was thinking they will never accept me. And, and put a little bit of your passion. Just, when I wrote that letter, I was a bit perhaps more passionate than I would have been if I had thought I have a chance. I thought I don't have a chance. I'm gonna be myself, and that's helped me a lot also in my plan.
Yeah, I'll pull on that. When I applied for the House Science Committee, I was against people who were coming also from Ivy Leagues and more focused on space policy. But I just wrote in my cover letter why it mattered to me and why it wasn't necessarily reflected in my resume because I hadn't had the opportunities to enter industry. But I just wrote about why I cared, why it was important, where I could see it going for myself and for the industry. So the passion definitely show it, and it's gonna, I said, account for like 70% of somebody opening the door for you if they see you're passionate, because it means you're gonna put in the effort, you're gonna put in the work, and that's gonna be really helpful. And one thing on mentorship, it's also finding sponsors. Those were very helpful for me and are still very helpful for me. These are, I would say, official mentors who also look to open doors for you. When I started at AIA, Alex Wagner, who is now in charge of manpower at the Air Force, he would just open opportunities for me. It's like, go do this. Like, I know that people in your rank wouldn't normally do this, but go do this. Like, it was him giving me opportunities. And he wasn't Hispanic, he wasn't Latino, but he helped me because he acknowledged my passion and said, and wanted to give me the opportunities to grow. And those people are going to be very helpful. And trust me, there's a lot of them in the industry because we've all gotten somewhere because of the help of someone else.
We're paying it back.
Yeah, so everyone's like, okay, somebody help me, I'll help the next person. So you'll find them in the industry once you're in, and they are going to be incredible people who become, I think, really part of like your extended family.
Well, those are amazing women, so they answered all the things here. So. But I would say just a couple things. Obviously, like they said, passion. I mean, no matter what you do in life, if you're passionate about something, you're going to excel in it. It doesn't matter, if you know anything about it, don't know anything about it. If you're passionate about it, you'll figure it out. And when you take that attitude into work and you come in and you're a person that's like, hey, I'm going to go figure it out no matter what, then people are going to claw onto that, and then they'll give you those opportunities and put you in places where you need to go be. So be bold in that. And then the last thing I'll say is that, I was very fortunate for the role that I've had now running a multi-billion-dollar business in space. So super cool. I can tell you right now, enjoy the ride. Like right now with all of your friends that are here, you guys probably came with somebody. This is all part of the experience. So, don't spend every day just trying to climb the ladder. I mean, obviously you've got to be passionate, you've got to work hard, but enjoy this time. You guys are in an amazing spot in your lives. Enjoy your friends, enjoy, the life that you guys are doing. And then as you go get it, it just becomes more fruitful when you get to the top.
That's great. I think CHR was very smart in having the pin that says be a dreamer, or I am a dreamer, because I think that you kind of exemplified that we need to ensure, and that's a lifelong learning. Yep. We should constantly be dreaming. So let me look to the future really quick, and before we turn to the audience Q&A. So to the future, there's all this hope and, we're, so many advancements. There's the promise of maybe, commercial space travel, leisure travel. There's also the promise of microgravity environment and doing space manufacturing, for example. Could you maybe all speak about what you see as kind of the promises, but also maybe the challenges of the future of aerospace? Because these are the people that will be working there.
Yeah, I'll jump real quick if you guys jump in. I mean, space is happening. I mean, if there's not one exciting place in the world right now, it is space, and it is only going to it's kind of like how the internet started. It was like, oh, there's this thing, it's kind of like this not real possible thing, and it's really hard, and nobody really understands it. Well, that's what space is. There's obviously been massive amount of influx of VC money, a lot more focus on it. And it's huge opportunities. It's only going to just continue to explode, especially from the commercial side. There are people doing things. I have my JPSS socks on right now. We just launched JPSS last week, so if you guys know, it's NASA satellite that Raytheon provides a sensor for. That sensor collects 28 bands of data. Okay. This was all made for looking at ocean colors and looking at aerosols and looking at moisture densities and looking at all these things, again, the NASA people thought we would go make the sensor for. Today, these VCs are using it way beyond the things that we ever planned it for. I had no plan for venture capitalists to be taking Beer's data, looking at moisture density in California versus Brazil, and putting futures on avocado crops. That was not really the plan when we made the sensor. It was really from a science perspective. But that's what's happening, and that's only going to just keep proliferating across the space and all the industries. I mean, and the reality is that space today gives us access to everything from our phones to going to the gas pumps to everyday part of our lives. And that is not going to change. It's only going to continue. So if you guys want to be in someplace, be in space. It's a cool place to go be.
I would say one of the challenges is making sure that we don't bring the same perspectives as we move forward into the cosmos eventually.
Yeah.
But so that's really in getting people like you a part of the industry, bringing your perspectives, your ideas, and what you see in the way that technology could be used. I'll bring in science fiction a little bit here, but Afrofuturism and Hispanic futurism are really good examples of how you can see technology and imagine it in a different perspective, in a different way. But that's also in reality. If you are a part of the conversation, if you're a part of everything, you can bring your perspective and imagine how a technology could be used differently and how a technology can help others, because there's also a lot of humanitarian work that's done with space technology. Mm-hmm. So there are so many aspects of it that if you bring your ideas, it'll only help us move forward in a more inclusive and fulfilling way, I would say, in the industry. So as we move forward, bringing your ideas, come into space, figure out how we can use technologies that are either already existing or not existing yet. Trust me, there's investment, there's funding. So come and help us build a better, have better perspectives as we move to the future.
Yeah, so about challenges as the scientist that I am, and having seen other developments, for example in artificial intelligence and that kind of thing, I always think, the policy guys are going to have I want to have the challenge of thinking of rules of things that haven't been developed yet, or that we are not there yet, but are going to be happening. So how these folks are going to prepare and and guide us through those new avenues. It's what I see as a challenge, and I'm sure that it's going to be successful as it has been in other fields that we weren't thinking about before, as artificial intelligence. In terms of the future, as the astronomer that I am, we are actually, I cannot say the date yet, but I'm part of a project that we are launching a tiny telescope to the moon. Unfortunately, the launch has been delayed. It's through the International Lunar Observatory Association. It's going to be a tiny telescope. It's like a camera, sending I would say, sophisticated cell phone to the moon. And it's going to take the first image from the moon of our galactic center, and I think it's going to open up the future of astronomy, and I see that future with telescopes on the moon, that it's going to be fantastic. And from a personal perspective and from a personal thing that I truly like, also space is going to open the opportunity of running experiments in the health sector that are not possible to do on Earth, and I think that advances in that sector are going to be terrific.
And you touched on a set of challenges that I'm excited about helping figure out, and that I think you all help as well, in terms of how do we explore and do space activities in a sustainable manner. And so responsibly, and what does responsible exploration look like? When you think about the moon, for example, there's a lot of people and countries and private companies that are interested in pretty much the same locations on the moon. And so even just physically, we don't have room to all do everything we want to do if we don't figure out how to do it properly, and who sets the best practices for, if something goes wrong, what should happen, and who should step back, who should help out, all of that. So for me, it's exciting to think about all those rules, best practices to be sustainable, both around Earth, so cleaning up the debris and figuring out how to not create more debris as we continue to use space, and then beyond all the way, as far as we can imagine.
Wonderful, thank you. It just shows the importance of so many disciplines, not just in science and engineering, but in political science and communication and data analysis. There's just so many disciplines and so many ways of contributing to the future of aerospace. So I'm opening the floor to you all. This is your moment. You have amazing mentors here, people that have carved really unique paths here. And I want to open up the floor to the audience for Q&A and to see if anyone has any questions. Yes, and if you just stand up and just your name and who you were with, but organization or institution.
Awesome, thank you. My name is Madeline. My name is Madeline. I'm a current CHCI Public Policy Fellow, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here talking with us today. I found the conversation just fascinating. I'm very interested in it. My question in particular, I will direct towards Laura and Karina. Just because I also don't really come from a strong STEM background myself. Like, I didn't study it. I studied international business, and I'm more into international affairs and political science type of field. And so how do you recommend that we break into spaces like this that are very STEM-oriented and very space-oriented? What kind of suggestions or tips can you give people like us? And also, you guys both specified a lot on mentorship. I was wondering, how do we build those connections? How do you recommend that we find those mentors and sponsors? Thank you.
So in terms of getting in, one of the, if you're a student, one of the, I think, low-hanging fruit is if you have papers due and projects due, make that connection between what you're doing for class with those topics that you're interested in, and then use that, submit that to a conference, and you give a presentation, and people will start associating your name with that nexus, right? There are hundreds of issues that align between space and international relations. That's not a false, that is totally a real field. And there's always a need for people to think through those challenges, right? So it's a matter of you creating your name that, hey, I'm one of those experts, right? So start presenting at conferences. I always recommend join professional organizations like AIAA and AAS, Women in Aerospace. There's dozens. And they're always looking for volunteers to get involved. But again, you're just looking for a platform to contribute, participate, and people will start thinking of you. And that's going to be how you start building your network. And that is how you're going to build those informal mentor relationships as well. Formal and informal. I think WIA had a formal mentor program some time ago, and maybe they still do. But for that note that I made about the informal mentorships, it's more of you making yourself available and participating, going to the events, staying for the reception, and interacting with people. It's awkward at the beginning, but we're all uncomfortable, so it's fine. And you start seeing the same faces over and over again, and that's how you're going to build those relationships.
Now, this industry is big, but it's small. There's a lot of people in it, but as Laura said, you start seeing the same faces over and over again, and you can connect and ask them questions. But I mean, even starting, this is how I started. I asked Lori a question and then went up to her, and I was not afraid to ask her for advice. And really just start reaching out to people, and like we all said, this industry is open and to help, and people are willing to answer some questions, grab a coffee. You're in a great space in terms of DC for meeting people that work in this industry. And also, if you're still in school, look at other possible internships down the line with either a Raytheon or a company
or NASA.
NASA has a great internship program. If you're still a student, apply for Set Factor.
Yes.
And there's so many opportunities. I think once you start Googling, you go down a rabbit hole of all the options that are there for students.
Yeah.
And I would also recommend, there's another loose coalition of people, a group called Engaging Scientists and Engineers in Policies. I mean, that's only if you are interested also in policy, not just in policy, but people that are across the U.S. students, but also academics and people in organizations like either whether you work at NASA or at AAAS. They share information. If you're in DC, they have happy hours, so it's an opportunity to network. They might have workshops and seminars. It's a way to kind of add on to your skill sets in different ways.
And by the way, international policy is actually one of my biggest problems right now because there's nothing out there that tells us how to do it. And because there's nothing out there that everyone's like, can we do it? Can I not do it? Can I sell this? Can I not sell this? It's really hard because we're in a whole new era that all these, even to how you do it, how much stuff we put in space, how I do it internationally. I mean, obviously the U.S. market is relatively saturated. International is just huge, and how to tap those markets and give all these other nations that want to be spacefaring nations the opportunity to do that.
And how much transparency,
Yeah.
how much info you share. So, any other?
She's got one.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being on this panel. I really appreciate it. My name is Viviana Costa. I work for SiriusXM. I have two questions that are basically related. One, I think you touched upon about sponsorship and basically how to find those sponsors and navigate those kinds of tough waters, especially as you get into more the managerial world. And basically, my question is about that. So the question I have is for women, for Latinas, who are not only female, but also the only person of color in management. How do you find support? How do you get support from up on high to bring you up even further and even try to open the door behind you? I've been having a really tough time basically throughout my career to try and do that. Outside of just kind of breaking open those doors, which isn't great. And the second question I have is that I'm actually also a parent. And I've found a lot of impediments as well there, specifically towards working parents. And what our industry is doing to supplement those costs and those time commitments to help us to actually not almost feel hindered by having children and not be able to break into the C-suite as a result. So thank you.
I'm going to respond to that only from because you asked all the women. I'm going to give you guys particularly, when it comes to in the managerial perspective, the hardest part for, let's say, from a male person that is an executive at a company that's our number one focus, we're still learning. Okay, we don't know the right answers. We don't know how to engage, how not to engage, and a lot of our other managers that have not been around, they're even worse. So what I would say is, obviously communication and engaging with those folks, because I try and look for feedback all the time. It's hard for me even to get feedback and honest feedback. And so the more that you guys can be honest with, those folks, especially the ones that are giving you the problems or that, maybe not be paying attention, those are the ones you go attack, because in most cases, it's not because they don't want the help or that they're meaning to do that. There's these everybody has, micro learning that we've done since we were little. And so it's backing all those things out that we have in our mind that we just don't know how to control yet. So we all need help doing that. So apologize for the rest of the people. We're getting there. But keep talking to people and keep giving your opinion, please.
Yeah, I would say that for me, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of moved a little fast through the ranks, so I ended up being a young Hispanic woman in a room full of old white men. And it's not, it's true. That's what the leadership in industry looks like, and there's like shifts going on, and it's great. But at the same time, what helped me was finding allies in the room. Finding people who I would have discussions with outside of meetings and saying like, I don't know if you've noticed, but when I say something, it gets either dismissed or the one that we've all faced is somebody else says the same idea and it gets taken as, but having those allies, I can say, thanks for bringing up Karina's idea. Thanks for bringing it back to that. And eventually starting to say yourself, thanks for mentioning what I said earlier, or thanks for bringing up the idea I mentioned, because one, you do have to, unfortunately, have that thick skin, and it develops little by little, but also having those allies that can help you in the room. And there's a lot of people, I think, that are willing to help if you have those honest conversations with them outside of the meeting space. And I think it's because, like you said, they don't realize they're doing these microaggressions that are not implicit in their minds. But if you start to talk to them and build those relationships, it can really help. And also, as you move up, I think one example that I saw with my company, and our CEO likes to talk about this, is that they didn't consider so much the paternal leave because there wasn't a lot of women in leadership. But then when we had more women in leadership, they said, hey, we don't think this actually is enough. And the CEO was like, I don't have kids. I didn't think about this. Thank you for bringing it up. And they looked at changing it, and now we have longer paternal leave that is inclusive of different kinds of couples. And it's all, again, bringing it up and having that conversation that sometimes might feel uncomfortable, and it's sometimes not intentional. It's just women hadn't been in those rooms yet, and there wasn't the opportunity for those conversations.
And I'll jump in real quick to say, but I wanted to acknowledge it is hard. Those obstacles are there, and there are barriers that you will encounter that maybe you will not be able to, surpass. And that might mean that you leave an organization. There's a point where I think you do speak up, you do find those allies, you do take advantage of every single resource that organization has, right? If it's an anonymous complaint box, if it's an ombudsman and someone you can talk to in a private way, use all of that. But there's a point where you will maybe have to decide, you know what? I'm better than this. And they're not taking advantage of that, so I leave, and they'll see that they lost a great person who is doing better somewhere else, because there are those shifts in the community. So I just wanted to say agree, and we've obviously been talking very positively about the sector, but it's a work in progress, and there's a lot of things that we shouldn't be doing anymore and that we're trying to do better. So don't wait for that change either. Don't give it 10 years.
And on that, I also like to mention something that we haven't talked about, but mental health. Take care of your mental health. And you did mention, don't focus your whole time on trying to climb things. Enjoy your life. Work is only a part of life. It's not life itself. And sometimes it can get a little difficult, I think, with our industry because we love what we do. And so it becomes a part of our identity. But I mean, I'll be honest, I have a therapist that I talk to that I've had to, deal with a lot of these issues where I just couldn't pass the obstacles. So how do I handle this? And how do I do this? And it's okay to be vulnerable with yourself, but having that support system around you is going to be helpful. Your friends, a therapist, if you can get it, and being able to do that. Because I struggled for a while with imposter syndrome, and I still do, and I had to do a lot of therapy to deal with it. And it's okay. It's normal to not feel that, and it's okay to leave, and it's okay to find other opportunities. Because if you're already there, it's likely that you're doing an amazing job, and you could just need a better environment that will let you flourish.
And imposter syndrome never goes away.
Yeah.
I still have it all the time, so trust me, just enjoy it right now.
A quick question is, how should people think about Space Force as a way of entering into aerospace communities? I know their top leadership has transitioned. There are several lieutenant generals who are females, as well as running their DEI office. So is that an area that you overlap in any way?
NASA works with Space Force. We have some number of agreements. Obviously, our mission is civil, but there are technologies and research areas that we share. I think it's a great place to start, especially for people that have an interest in a military career anyway. That's a great entryway into space, and they are trying to figure out a lot of the same challenges that we are as well.
Yeah, I think we see it a lot, obviously. The Space Force is now often hiring people like crazy, and they're seeing the same problem, right? It's like there's just not enough of those people that are, even in the pipeline. So we've been partnering with them with the National Academy Foundation that goes into high schools to really focus on STEM to try to drive more into the pipeline. And there'll be more investment, I would say, coming out of that, especially with the Space Force now. As they start staffing up and seeing the same problem that industry has been seeing, there should be a lot more focus on, trying to drive, diversity within the space industry.
Yeah, I was recently in a panel with the Space Force, and we talked about all of this, and there is a big opportunity right now because they are staffing up. I think they have, what, like a 40% of staffing done, so they have a lot of positions open, both internally within the military and civilians that can come in and work. So it's a good opportunity for those who are interested in more of a military career, and defense space is huge too.
Yeah, NASA historically, it's been a relationship between civil and military space from the very beginning. It's very important. So I think unfortunately we could spend another hour.
Stay here all day.
We could stay here all day. There is. But I hope we will be able to continue the conversation through the rest of the Tech Summit. Don't forget to use the hashtag CHCI Summit. But before we close, I want to give each of you an opportunity to go on any kind of reflections and closing comments before we.
I think we've touched on everything I wanted to make sure to touch on. I think I'll leave with that theme of STEM. STEM is really important, but I don't think of just those letters. Think about all the other careers that are kind of associated with that. And so if you're interested in it, you will find your place in it.
I think I would just say that be passionate about what you do, be bold, network a lot, and trust your skills. Trust them.
Build your community. I would say, yes, networking is a thing that everyone will tell you about in DC, but I think it's important to build a community out of that network and something that you feel genuine to have those discussions. So build your community.
I'll top it off with, I said space is exploding. If you guys want to grow and you guys want career paths, this is the place to be right now because Silicon Valley is in the, got Bitcoin, a lot of stuff going on there. Space is the place. And a lot of opportunity for you guys to grow, so please engage. If you're passionate about it, go do it.
Okay. Well, join me in thanking our speakers.